The Star Wars franchise is so impossibly huge that barely a week goes by without a new piece of media raising a whole host of questions for the fanbase to fiercely debate. But as it stands, there are countless long-lingering questions about the series which have remained unanswered for years, or even many decades. And so, Star Wars fans being the inquisitive, passionate bunch they are, they've been demanding answers ever since. Yet it remains to be seen whether or not each of the following 10 burning questions in particular will actually ever get legitimate canonized answers one way or another. I mean, hopefully, but we're still bloody waiting at time of recording. So with that in mind, I am Gareth, this is What Culture Star Wars, and here are 10 Star Wars questions we still need answers to. Number 10, everything about Yoda's species. Let's kick things off with arguably the single biggest, most speculated upon mystery in the entirety of Star Wars. What exactly is up with Yoda's species, man? Yep, it's a biggie, isn't it? In the almost half-century that the franchise has existed, we've been given curiously little context for the species that Yoda, Yaddle, and Grogu belong to. Hell, we don't even have an official name for what they are beyond Yoda's species. But there are so many other unanswered questions we can touch on within this. Where do they originate from? How many members of Yoda's species are there? Are they all Force-sensitive? So many questions, man. And here's another biggie. Why does Yoda talk the way he does? Ordering sentences object, subject, verb. The recent Tales of the Jedi series canonically confirmed that Yaddle orders her sentences just as humans do. So why is Yoda being different? He's probably just being awkward for the banter, isn't he? And while there's definitely a large subset of Star Wars fans dying to have these questions answered, there are actually also many who prefer to savor the mystery and ambiguity of Yoda's species, rather than risk demystifying them to the point that they cease to be interesting, especially if all the answers aren't actually that great in the end. Given that the franchise's creative inner circle has remained tight-lipped about it all for so many decades, it honestly wouldn't be surprising if most of these questions are just forever left unanswered. Now I've got a quick question for you. What is your favorite Yoda moment in all of Star Wars? You throw it in that comment section down below and I will look and I will cheer. Number 9, is Cad Bane really dead? Fan favorite bounty hunter Cad Bane made his live-action debut in the woefully underwhelming The Book of Boba Fett, and chief among its disappointments was the decision to seemingly kill Bane off at the end of the series, when he's fatally impaled by Boba Fett. Given the basically endless potential to see Bane mixing it up with the likes of Din Djarin, Ahsoka Tano, and so on, to off him after a fleeting appearance in a staggeringly mid-Star Wars series just felt like a colossal waste. It broke my damn heart. And yet, this being Star Wars, of course fans flatly refused to let the matter go, surmising that in a franchise where no one's ever really gone, surely there was a way for Bane to return. This was bolstered by the release of last year's Star Wars Timelines book, which only referred to Bane as being out of action rather than explicitly declaring him dead. And so the matter remains very much up in the air for now, and it likely won't be cleared up unless Disney actually decides to do something new with the character. Here's hoping, eh? Bring back my blue icon, damn it! Number 8, where did the Chosen One prophecy come from? The notion of the Chosen One prophecy was first introduced in The Phantom Menace, with Qui-Gon believing that Anakin was the one fated to restore balance to the Force. Despite its importance in the prequels, we don't really ever learn that much about the prophecy in the films, namely where it originated from, and why large swaths of the Jedi Order believe in it so dogmatically. Even in the Legends continuity, concrete information about the prophecy is incredibly scarce, possibly because George Lucas had the good sense to appreciate how wildly convoluted it might become if he started getting incredibly specific about it. A sliver of light was, however, shone on the matter in Claudia Gray's canon novel Master and Apprentice, which focuses heavily on Qui-Gon's belief in the prophecy, and even includes the full exact wording of the prophecy itself. While its specificity referring to a chosen one born of no father certainly clarifies why Qui-Gon was so convinced that Anakin was the one, quite where the prophecy itself came from nevertheless remains rather vague. Strokes goatee. All the same, fans sure would love to know where such an important piece of Jedi rhetoric originated. It's often been speculated that an ancient Jedi came up with it in the distant past, but again, that's just hopeful scuttlebutt, isn't it? Number 7, what happened to Broom Kid? The Last Jedi's tantalizing final scene showed a lingering glimpse of a character now referred to by fans as Broom Kid, a young fathier stable hand on Canto Bight, who can be seen using the Force to move a broom while cleaning up the stables. Naturally, many fans assumed that the character, later named Tamiri Blag, would show up again in The Rise of Skywalker or other Star Wars media, but today that hasn't actually been the case. And so, fans continue to wonder what became of Broom Kid since The Last Jedi. No matter that many believe Rian Johnson never intended for him to be a recurring character. Rather, it can be argued that he simply represents Luke's hope spreading throughout the galaxy. And the notion that you don't need a convoluted familial tie to be a Force user, you can be anyone. Then again, with the Rey movie in active development at the moment, anything can happen. I mean, he could return and become an honest-to-God character in his own right. Would you really be that shocked? Number 6. Why was there so little evolution between the original trilogy and sequels? One common point of contention for Star Wars fans is the bafflingly slow advancement of, well, everything between the original trilogy and the sequels, but most specifically technology. Much as our own world tells us that new tech is developed at a lightning-fast pace and changes massively over the span of 30 years, that being the same chasm of time between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, you'd barely know it in the world of Star Wars. Most everything we see in the originals feels of a piece with the sequel tech. The ships, droids, weapons, and so on seemingly hit a hard stop of development at some point in the past, and that's it. Even accepting the understandable creative desire to have new Star Wars looking fairly consistent with what came before, a notion the prequels ambitiously contradicted, it's still shocking how little the galaxy appears to have moved on over a 3-decade period. All that time and barely any change is just a bit weird. And there is no unambiguous answer for it in the lore itself, sadly. Thanks for checking out this list today, my friend. Now hit that subscribe button down below for more What Culture Star Wars stuff in your day. Number 5. How many Wookiee Jedi are there? New Star Wars series The Acolyte introduced the first live-action Wookiee Jedi in the series' history, by way of Kel Naka, which naturally renewed discussion about precisely how many Wookiee Jedi there might actually be in the galaxy. Canonically, only a small handful of Wookiee Jedi have ever been glimpsed in the wider universe, including Arkoff, Buriaga Agaburi, Ty Voka, and most prominently in the Clone Wars animated series, Wookiee Jedi Padawan Gungi. Oh, we love Gungi. In the Legends canon, meanwhile, there's Chewbacca's nephew, Lowbacca. The presence of Force-sensitive Wookiees was reportedly minimized because George Lucas wasn't thrilled about it for whatever reason, in turn causing them to basically become statistical anomalies. So while we know that they're few and far between, given the sheer vastness of the galaxy, we're none the wiser as to exactly how many active Wookiee Jedi there are just doing their thing out there. Number 4. What happened to Delta Squad? Delta Squad is an elite quartet of clones who were introduced in the Republic Commando video games and novels, consisting of Clone Sergeant Boss, Second-in-Command Fixer, Scorch, and Sev. 2005's Republic Commando game left Delta Squad on something of an agonizing cliffhanger, as Boss, Fixer, and Scorch set out to rescue an embattled Sev. And despite being fan-favorite characters since their inception, this thread wasn't ever explicitly picked up again. Though the Republic Commando brand was jettisoned from the Star Wars canon when Disney acquired Lucasfilm in 2012, Delta Squad were thankfully preserved prior to this through their cameo appearance in the 3rd season of the Clone Wars. And yet, we're still left to ponder what ultimately became of them. Answers have been thin on the ground for all but Scorch, who recently appeared in the 3rd season of The Bad Batch, only to be summarily shot dead by Clone Force 99. So much for that then. The little we've seen of Delta Squad since Republic Commando does seem to suggest that the game's cliffhanger ending, which involved the rescue of Wookiee chieftain Tarful, is canon. And so, are we to believe that Sev was still MIA at the end of the Clone Wars? And as for Boss and Fixer, well, place your bets, folks. Number 3. Did the Deathstick guy truly reform himself? Because not all pressing Star Wars questions need to be totally serious business, let's consider the untold history of one of the prequel trilogy's most memorable minor characters. In Attack of the Clones, Obi-Wan encounters a Deathstick's dealer in a Coruscant nightclub, and promptly uses a Jedi mind trick to make him go home and rethink his life. And so, what became of this guy? Did he really turn things around in the end? Though, canonically, the answer is pretty muddy. In the Jettison Legends continuity, the fate of this character, Elan Celsa Bagno, was unambiguously revealed. In Legends stories, we learn that Celsa Bagno did indeed quit his Deathstick dealing and clean up his life for a little while. He eventually fell back into old habits though, trading weapons and stolen goods alongside his precious Deathsticks. By the end of the Clone Wars, however, he'd once again gone straight, and even became an anti-drug activist, seemingly for keeps. Canonically, we only know that he ended up having a child by the time of the original trilogy, though of course being a parent in no way guarantees that he's leading a good and honest life, does it? Some parents are terrible. Number 2. How did Maz get Luke's lightsaber? Love or hate the Star Wars sequels, there is something we can all agree on. It is infuriating that we never learned how Maz Kanata got hold of the Skywalker lightsaber in The Force Awakens. When Han Solo asked Maz where she got it, she critically replied, "A good question for another time." And yet, by the time the sequel trilogy closed out, we were not any closer to learning the truth. When was this other time? Given that roughly 30 years passed between Luke losing the lightsaber on Cloud City and Maz giving it to Finn, it is reasonable to assume that it passed through many hands before ending up in Maz's castle. Charles Soule's 2020 Star Wars comic series did reveal that the lightsaber was discovered in the trash by an Ugnaught, but as for where it went from there and how it got to Maz, that is anyone's guess. Though it's hardly the most vital question in terms of the sequel trilogy's overarching narrative logic, it has nevertheless bugged fans for the better part of a decade. Yep, that's right, a decade. We are all getting old. All the more because it really seemed like Maz was gonna circle back to this one day. But alas, no. And number 1, who is the Armorer? The Armorer was first introduced in The Mandalorian, and remains one of the most transfixing characters in recent Star Wars history. This is in large part because we've never seen her face and little concrete is known about who she is. Though we do know she's portrayed by Emily Swallow. Beyond repairing the Mandalorians' armor, she also provides spiritual counsel to them, and is very clearly held in a high regard by the tribe she leads. There's no questioning her skill and intelligence, but in terms of her wider motivations, personality, and her actual name, we're pretty much left in the dark. One suspects that Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni might opt to keep the Armorer's characterization vague indefinitely, to inject some intrigue back into a franchise that, according to many fans, is a little too into the idea of fan service for its own good. They may have a point. The fan theories about the Armorer's true identity are fascinatingly diverse, from being a Jedi who survived Order 66, to even being Darth Maul's follower Rogue Cast. Take your pick basically, because it's entirely possible we'll be left on the hook about this one for a long time in this galaxy far, far away, if not forever.